Imagine stepping into a world where every battle is brutal, every mistake is punishing, and every victory feels like a hard-earned triumph. If you've played any FromSoftware game, you already know that challenge is the core experience. Two of the most legendary titles in their lineup, Dark Souls and Elden Ring, have fueled countless debates. Which game is truly harder? Is Dark Souls more punishing because of its tight linear design that forces players to face obstacles head-on? Or does Elden Ring's massive open world and unpredictable boss encounters make it the bigger challenge? Today, we break down every aspect: combat, boss fights, progression, and difficulty spikes, to finally settle the debate. Which game is the ultimate test of skill? 1. Game structure and exploration. Which one is more punishing? Both Elden Ring and Dark Souls feature intricate world designs that demand exploration, patience, and a sharp awareness of your surroundings. Dark Souls, tight, interconnected world. Semi-open world design with strict progression paths. Players must push forward through brutal areas. There are no easy escape routes. Bonfires, checkpoints, are limited, making every step forward a risk. No map system, meaning memorization is key to survival. Hardest element. If you get stuck, you have to fight through. No alternative paths to level up elsewhere. Elden Ring. A massive open world that can overwhelm. A fully open world where players can roam freely and choose their battles. If a boss is too tough, you can explore other areas, level up, and return stronger. Fast travel makes recovering from death easier. A detailed map helps navigate the world, but it can also overwhelm new players. Hardest element. The game doesn't hold your hand. You can accidentally walk into a high-level boss and get one-shotted. Verdict. Dark Souls feels harder because there's less flexibility. You must fight through every roadblock with no shortcuts. Elden Ring gives players more freedom, but that doesn't necessarily make it easier. 2. Combat mechanics. Which one demands more skill? Both games require precise timing, patience, and mastery of enemy patterns. Dark Souls. Slower, more methodical combat. Tightly balanced combat. Every move costs stamina, making each attack a commitment. Limited dodging ability, forcing perfectly timed rolls to survive. Parrying is difficult but rewarding. Mastering it is key for experienced players. Magic builds are strong, but slower, meaning melee combat is often necessary. Hardest element. No second chances. If you mistime an attack, you're punished instantly. Elden Ring. Faster, more versatile combat. More movement options, jump attacks, mounted combat, and mid-air strikes. Better dodging mechanics make the game feel smoother, but also demand quicker reflexes. Magic builds are much stronger, making ranged combat a real alternative. Spirit ashes and summons allow players to bring eye-controlled allies into battle. Hardest element. Bosses hit faster, harder, and with less predictable attack patterns. Verdict. Dark Souls has more restrictive combat, forcing players to learn enemy patterns perfectly. Elden Ring offers more tools, but the faster enemy attacks make reaction times even more crucial. 3. Boss difficulty. Which game has the most brutal fights? Boss fights are the heart and soul of these games, testing everything you've learned. Dark Souls. Slower, tactical bosses. Bosses have simple but devastating attacks, making timing and positioning key. Parrying is possible for some bosses, making skilled play extremely rewarding. No summons, unless you bring online players, meaning you have to face every boss alone. Hardest bosses. Ornstein Smough, Dark Souls 1. 2 enemies at once, requiring constant movement and awareness. Manus, Father of the Abyss, Dark Souls 1 DLC. Unrelenting attacks, nearly impossible to dodge without perfect timing. Fume Knight, Dark Souls 2. No room for error, insanely powerful combos. Elden Ring. Aggressive, fast-paced bosses. Bosses have multi-phase battles, meaning you need to adapt quickly. They attack faster, hit harder, and barely give time to breathe. Summons make fights more manageable, but bosses are designed to overwhelm players regardless. Hardest bosses. Malenia, Blade of Miquella. Near instant attacks, a healing mechanic, and an unpredictable second phase. Radagon and Elden Beast, a two-phase final boss that punishes aggressive players. Godfrey, First Elden Lord, changes attack patterns mid-fight, throwing off even experienced players. Verdict. Dark Souls bosses feel more fair, but punish mistakes more harshly. Elden Ring bosses attack faster and have more mechanics, making them feel harder overall. 4. Progression and difficulty spikes. Which game is more unforgiving? Dark Souls. Linear but brutal progression. Each area gets harder, with no way to skip difficult sections. Bosses serve as checkpoints, meaning you have to defeat them to move forward. Limited healing flasks. Estus Flask, making each fight more dangerous. Hardest part. Some areas force players through near-impossible enemy placements before reaching a boss. Elden Ring. Open-ended but no hand-holding. You can level up and explore to get stronger, but that doesn't guarantee an easier fight. Some bosses scale differently, making it hard to predict when you're strong enough. You can find OP weapons and spells early, but you still need to master dodging and attack patterns. Hardest part. The game lets you go anywhere, but that means you can accidentally walk into a boss way beyond your level. Verdict. Dark Souls forces players through brutal difficulty spikes with no way to avoid them. Elden Ring allows more flexibility, but bosses are generally harder and more relentless. Which game is harder? So, which game is truly the harder challenge? Dark Souls is harder in a traditional sense. It's more punishing, offers fewer ways to escape difficulty, and forces players to master every fight. Elden Ring bosses are more aggressive and complex, but the open-world design gives players ways to prepare before taking on challenges. Ultimately, Dark Souls is the harder game for players who prefer strict linear difficulty. However, Elden Ring's bosses are faster, harder, and demand quicker reflexes, making it a greater challenge for reaction-based combat. Which game gave you the hardest time? What do you think? Is Dark Souls harder because of its punishing design? Or is Elden Ring more difficult because of its relentless bosses? Which game challenged you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love deep dive gaming discussions, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more content. Prepare to die over and over again.